Agree to disagree. This is the first episode we're doing, and we're going to be talking about a couple of issues that you two see from different lenses. But the goal today is not to win, but to find some common ground. Ultimately, well, let's start with some introductions. Dylan, can you give a few minute brief summary on what industry you're in, and can you also tell me what kind of shapes your political views?
A little bit about me, I suppose. I work in finance, specifically mergers and acquisitions. I've been doing that for a few years now. And I think my political opinions have changed a good amount, especially over the years. I think originally I was pretty conservative on almost all issues, and I think that was just a result of growing up in a very conservative community. And then when I graduated high school, moved to Indiana and then later to New York City. And I think those experiences have shaped my beliefs a little bit just because I've been exposed to a lot of different viewpoints. And a lot of them are stupid, but I think there was a few that I took away that
Sure.
I believe now. So yeah, I think that's how I've changed. And now, so some would say I've moved a little bit left. I think generally I kind of describe myself as a centrist libertarian.
Sure. Yeah. Emery, back to you. Can you tell me what industry you're in? And also, Sam, can you tell me kind of the life experiences that have brought you to your political stance today?
hmm Yeah. Hi, my name is Emery. I'm a software engineer, and I've always been in the tech software engineering industry. And what I'd say shaped my experience is, growing up in Nebraska, and a lot of that experience growing up in Nebraska was that of a black man. And so, in a lot of instances, the typical, I don't want to say, well, I don't know better than to say this, conservative culture can be rather exclusionary of, minorities and black people in America. And so that almost necessitated um, me looking for community elsewhere, which led to me being more exposed to sort of, the out group. Um, and as I've gone on, of course, my political opinions became more informed by like what I know, what I reason, the media I consume, and just my heavy presence on the internet. But the tech industry tended to be a very left-leaning um, group of people, and I think that's really where I initially came from when it comes to my opinions and viewpoints.
Sure. I appreciate that response and thank you to both of you for spending some time with me today. We have some fun topics to talk about and we made sure to vet it so we have disagreement. So we're going to find disagreement no matter where we go. There's no worry about that. And we're going to start on a very important topic to I think both of you. You both have connection to New York and New York City and you're very passionate on seeing the success of New York City. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Yes.
Awesome. So, well, Mondami, absolutely polarizing figure for right-wing people. Um, Super, super good at utilizing social media and reaching young voters. And, he absolutely knocked it out of the park. So the question is, he's moving to freeze rents by October of 26, and I would start with Emory and say, why is this essential for the 2.5 million New Yorkers in these units?
I think the biggest thing is just that the cost of renting in New York isn't something that's been keeping pace with the wages of the people. Often year after year, you would see this from the most luxury apartments to even like, apartments like a few billions owned by a single landlord. They would continually bump up these prices year after year because these people don't really have a choice as to where to move. They're sort of already here. They are kind of locked into where they are, and it leads to that exploitation. And I think that the rent freeze is a good tool in order to further preventing any more harm, any more people having to lose their housing. Um, and so I think it's a very solid first step for a more comprehensive housing plan that Mamdani has laid out.
Okay. What would you have to say about the criticism of the impact on the landlords, Emery? The
Um,
landlords, they're there to make a profit.
mhm. I think it makes sense. And, you know, I think that landlords who don't currently participate in such practices or those who um, I do know that unrelated to rent freeze, Mamdani has policies that may target some who would be considered more parasitic landlords. I think that um, being a landlord, it's still a viable business in New York City despite the rent freeze, and I don't I don't see them having any more issue continuing to operating as they are with the current policies.
Sure. Dylan, kind of in response to that, why are rent freezes in New York City a detriment to New York City?
Yeah, I think it's kind of backwards. I think the real problem with New York City and rent prices is that there's not enough housing. I think that's why, at the end of the day, rents are so high. It's because a lot of people want to live here, and there's a very limited amount of space for people to live. Therefore, these parasitic landlords can charge whatever they want, basically, because people, which they do have a choice, they could choose to live elsewhere, but they don't because they really want to live here, and so. That's why people are able to raise rents every year. But so let's say we just freeze the rents, and that'll be great, except for the fact that why would anyone want to create more housing when there's rent freezes? Like it's just takes away the incentive to create more housing. So that's why I said it's kind of backwards because I think it'll have the opposite effect where now we're restricting the housing supply even more. I think if you want to lower housing prices and rent, then you should think of ways how we can increase the supply of housing. Maybe it's actually the other way. Maybe it's reducing like regulations and zoning and things like that. I think that's a big reason why. Now, of course, it's going to be more difficult in practice because there's a lot of people who have interest in not building more housing. Um, it's namely the current like landowners who like their views and don't want extra buildings and obstructing their views and things like that.
Sure. So, Emery, what is your response when Dylan says that people have the opportunity to live elsewhere? It's not like anything is tying them down to New York City and forcing them to live in expensive places.
I mean, I feel like that simply isn't true. There's people, not only is there stuff like, being part of community and obligations like that, people's entire families are already in New York City, but it's also very expensive to move from, move anywhere, even within the same neighborhood, let alone from a city. And so it's very, very hard for people to just uproot their entire life, Not only do they have to find a new job, but they'll have to find a new place to live, build those new connections, to all those logistics make it practically impossible for those who are in a position where they'd be most helped by rent freezes to move out of the city.
And I just kind of want to keep it on this train of thought here. Dylan, I want to send it right back to you on his response.
So, so kind of reading between the lines, the point you're making is that the price of rent is not really like an efficient price. This is artificially high because the landlords are price gouging. But if we're actually pricing it according to the value that that provides, you're saying it would probably be less, right?
Yes, I would agree with that.
Then why wouldn't some other savvy landlords just undercut their price a little bit? Because if it covers all their like you said, you don't think any landlords are going to go out of business. You think they'll still be doing just fine. If that were the case, don't you think there'd be at least a few landlords who, to beat the competition, just undercut their prices a little bit because they'll still be making profit and doing well in business, like you said?
Sure, I mean, that could be the case. It could also be the case that the landlords, seeing that they have tenants locked into their buildings, um, could agree to increase their prices in lockstep.
Okay, so now you're making an argument that landlords in New York City are colluding with each other.
Well, I don't think it's like direct collusion, but it's definitely the trend. You don't have to directly communicate to see, oh, the trend for buildings in the area is for the price to go up $50. Let me increase the rent to match the value of the other properties in the area, because why would I want my property to be a lower valued one when I could be charging the same as other similar properties?
Because you want less vacancy.
I mean, sure, but if they don't have a choice, then what does it matter? Just bump up the rent.
They,
They'll figure it out.
they do have a choice. It's a very competitive market out there. I'm sure you've looked at the New York City housing market.
It's it's competitive, all right. I mean, competing for who has the highest price, maybe.
I think I kind of disagree with the philosophy. I don't think, I've worked in finance for a while now. I don't think that that's how business works. I don't think that's how business people think. It's not like, oh, we're still doing all right. We might as well stay in business. Like economics happens at the margins. If your profit decreases 1%, then people are going to make decisions based on that, and they're going to react accordingly. So I think if you want more housing, then you should incentivize more housing. I think you should incentivize the behavior you want to see. One question I did want to ask you, though, Emery, when it comes to the rent freeze itself, how do you feel about? I think the response from a lot of landlords to this will just be to not put any more investment into their apartments, and the quality of those apartments or whatever it is will decrease over time because there's
Um,
no incentive to, like, people are just going to be chomping at the bit to get those rent controlled apartments. You don't There's no incentive to put any investment into that.
I mean, I think that hmm, well, before I say it, I think that Mamdani does have, no, I know that he has a policy for those bad slash inactive landlords who decide to skimp on their responsibilities with maintaining the property. Um, but I think that there's like this like unspoken notion here that the only way for a landlord to remain in business is to continually see more and more value appear out of nowhere from their property year after year. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I don't believe that um in the same way, I mean, honestly, that'd be a tangent, but I don't believe that um we should be treating these properties as infinite value creation machines here. I think that's rather anti-human.
Um, well, isn't any asset a infinite money machine or whatever?
It Are there? They aren't really.
Yeah, like I don't know. If I buy a vending machine, that's just going to create profit into infinity.
Well, no, you have to maintain the machine and you have to keep it
Yeah.
stocked and you have to acquire the products to fill the machine. I mean, there's costs involved in maintaining a vending machine. I mean,
Oh, but being a landlord, there's no cost to that at all.
there are costs to that, but not costs that scale scale to the level that they've been increasing rent year after year.
Well, I think they do actually. Otherwise, the rent prices wouldn't be so high.
So
Like I said before, if there's like an exorbitant amount of profit being made, then that just opens the door for someone else to undercut that. And I'm basically just explaining how economics works, um, but yeah, then eventually it'll come down, and that's kind of why it's at price. And another thing I was thinking about is when you're talking about this scenario of the tenant who's not really able to leave because it's very expensive to leave, and they have a whole community here and everything else. I think you're describing a very specific type of New Yorker, but there are a lot of people who don't fall into that. People like you and I, who we absolutely do respond to these different incentives. Like I really want to live in Lower Manhattan, but I don't because it's very expensive, and the place that I could get there would be very small. So instead, I would live in Upper Manhattan. But
mhm,
I think that's an example of the way that like these things do matter, and people do respond to these different incentives.
that's fair. That's not to say that um, either sort of person definitely do exist in New York, and I think that there's a great quantity. More and more people are coming to New York, and are I would even say like privileged in the way that like they're coming in and being able to like choose from the best spots. Um, but there's been I'm certain there's millions of New Yorkers. I don't think it's a small amount at all who are here and been part of these communities for multiple generations and are locked in that sense. Um, and so one thing I want to ask you though, Dylan, is that you referred to some sort of incentive for landlords to continue building as a way to stimulate more affordable housing development. I was curious as to what those incentives you described look like.
Um, if you put a lot of investment into your building, then you'd be able to charge more for rent. That's the main one.
I'm having a hard
And if
time
you
seeing.
don't keep up your apartment, your complex or whatever it is, then people will decide to leave. That's kind of what I'm going through with my apartment right now. It's not being upkept very well, and so I'm starting to look elsewhere. I think I might start go to a different apartment, somewhere where I'll get treated how I want to.
I'm having a hard time seeing how that encourage further development, though. If that's the current state of affairs, then how are we in this housing crisis?
Well, I think we both agree prices are very high for rent.
And so making it so that they can charge higher prices will solve it.
I just I just want people to be able to charge what things are worth. I don't want any kind of caps on that because then that distorts the economy in weird ways, and it just results in an allocation of resources that's not the most efficient.
You think an open market, Dylan, is the most fair way to handle any commodity, right?
Most of the time, yeah, there are exceptions. But yeah, I think that's always going to be the most efficient way to distribute resources. Um, And like in this particular case, I think there are very clear, obvious ways to increase the supply of housing. Like it's incredibly difficult to build in New York City. They make it impossible to get permits and all these sorts of things. In zoning laws, you can't put apartment buildings next to stores in some locations and all these sort. Like if we just open the floodgates and let the free market handle it, then we would have all kinds of mixed development housing and we'd have more skyscrapers. Like the city would balloon. And I think the rent prices would come down as a result. I think they're artificially being propped up high because of all this regulation.
I think we could go on for hours on this. Like this topic I knew would be really passionate for both of you, especially since I would consider Dylan to be very economically conservative and I would consider Emery to be the opposite.
It
So
is true.
I think that was a good back and forth. I don't think we're going to be able to find as much common ground on that topic than maybe some of these other topics, but due to time, we're going to move to an interesting one. I mean, there's no doubt you see it in the news. One of the biggest issues facing our country right now is the disagreement on illegal immigration. Dylan, I'll start with you since I started with Emery last time. Why do you think it's important that only U.S. citizens vote and not the non-U.S. citizens that are in those cities and states?
Um,
Do you have to
this
check
is
your back there?
well, there's like some yeah, there's somebody driving by and they're like stopping. I don't know. This is kind of an interesting one. I I don't know if I could really articulate why someone who's not a citizen should not vote. I guess
Do you think it
because they don't
dilutes the
have.
value of being a citizen?
I don't know if that's as important as just like I think they wouldn't have as much invested in the community if like they're not a citizen. Like I think you should have something at stake if you're going to vote on what happens. And also there's like a citizenship test that you have to take in order to become a citizen. So we want to like, and part of that is ensuring that whoever's voting is educated and they understand the culture and the foundations of this country and all of that.
I already know Emery's gonna pounce on this one. Emery, back to you. Why is it not mandatory to be a U.S. citizen? Why do you think that people who are non-citizens right now should still be able to vote and elect representation in their area?
I think, you know, there's one thing there's two ways to look at it, What should be the case from what one's perspective is, oh, this community should be full of citizens. What actually is the case is that tons of communities have members who aren't citizens or haven't, been there as long as others. But in order to properly represent their interests, I do think that given a set amount of time, and I'm not sure on particulars what parameters there should be in order for them to be able to start weighing in on community decisions, but I definitely think that there should be some level of representation for everybody who resides within a community, is contributing within a community. Um, and that's where I'm coming from on this issue. I think that tons of communities have plenty of members who aren't currently citizens who should be able to weigh in on how things go because it does, they do, pack up their entire lives and move here. And I don't think switching from the non-citizenship status to citizen changes their level of investment for some of these people.
Do you think a non-citizen then is just as much of American as a citizen? Would you look at it that way? If they're on American soil and they're contributing to society?
Effectively, yeah.
Okay, I'd like to hear
Uh,
Dylan's response.
Yeah, I definitely disagree. I think there is a lot of investment and buy-in that comes with becoming a citizen. Like I think I lived in Greece for a few months, but I don't consider myself Greek or think that like I have just as much of a right to say what goes on in that country as people who are born there and have lived there their entire lives and all these things. I think I don't know, that would be kind of crazy to me. Like I don't when I went to Greece, I didn't expect to vote or have a say in how they run their country. I think that's kind of wild to me. Um, and but yeah, I think it's there's a lot of hoops that you have to jump through to becoming a citizen, and which is makes it more difficult. And I think there's a lot of reasons why that matters, I guess. And then also, I think maybe one question for you would be if there has to be how do you decide who gets to vote and who doesn't? Is it like literally anyone who's lived in the United States for any period of time at all? Like what about students who are just here for a semester or something? Do they get to vote? How do we need some kind of way to decide who gets to vote and not?
Yeah, and I will agree. I don't think that, like a tourist or something like that should be able to weigh on a community. I agree that would be
Is
a
there
little
like a
much.
yearly requirement? How long you have to live here before you start to get that right?
hmm I do think yearly requirement would be a good heuristic for it. But maybe not. I would say like my first thought would be maybe some sort of stage thing here. After a few years, you can start weighing in on local elections, and then maybe the path to citizenship will allow you to weigh in on the federal election. But I do think that there are those who we can reliably say are here to invest more in the United States. And a lot of times that's when they're doing that, immigration process, like visas or something, that declared intent is a good way of marking, okay, who's here for touristy reasons, who's here for study abroad, versus who's here to actually, start working towards building a full life in the United States.
Emery,
Mhm.
and maybe you both will disagree with me on this one, so maybe the host will become biased. But a big right-wing criticism is if we allow anybody to vote, whether they, are a citizen or not, does that incentivize one party to have a large influx of illegal immigrants to come into our country and to put them in states that are, a little closer swing states and really kind of prop up that vote?
Would you like to respond first?
That's interesting. I'll start with Emery.
I think that Um, it could be the case that that happens either way. Honestly, with some of the voting patterns I've seen in the previous elections, I have no idea what that would actually end up looking like. I know some people may guess, oh, maybe the Democratic Party might see a boon from this, but sometimes, you would see a big swing from certain groups for the Republican Party too. But I think that if we make the path to as long as we're inviting people in who are contributing to the community and having giving them an easy path in and everything, um, and hmm, I think that I don't necessarily care who they end up voting for. I just care that they're, you know, having a good life and contributing positively to the community that they're a part of. That's my main concern.
My only devil's advocate would be I'm probably voting for the person who brought me to the dance, if a party brings me into a country, I'm probably gonna have more of a positive bias for them. But I'd like to hear what Dylan has to say on this. I'd like for you to respond to that right-wing criticism that I brought up and then respond to what Emery had to say.
Um, I don't know. I tend to be careful with this one because I think I don't know how real it is, how concrete this is versus just narratives and things that people say. Like I think this is a narrative that's very common, especially among the right. But I haven't done any research myself to know if there's any truth to that, because it does start to get into the realm of conspiracy theory stuff. Because that does, like to me, even like that sounds scary. Like if one party was able to get an influx of people here, then they would obviously be incentivized to vote for that party, and so that seems like it could definitely have adverse consequences. But one part maybe I wanted to respond to Emery on is it seems like a lot of your position on this comes from a belief that there's something wrong with the immigration system. And I think my response to that would be, I think that's kind of like a separate issue. Like, if you think there should be an easier path to citizenship, then I think that's another conversation to have, and we should focus on fixing that first. But instead of fixing that, to just say now you don't even have to be a citizen to vote, I think that would be a little bit of an overreaction. But before that, I would rather just fix the issue with the path to citizenship.
Emery, do you have a response to conclude this topic? I didn't expect this topic to take terribly long because, fair enough, we haven't done a ton of research
Yeah,
into this topic. This is kind of a nuanced topic, but Emery, I want to give you an opportunity to respond until we move on.
yeah, I will. I'll keep it brief. I'll say, yeah, I haven't done too much research into this myself. That's fair, but I'll keep it honed in on the specific criticism or specific, yeah, concern with regards to people being um biased towards voting for a particular party. But all I say is this: if a given party does something that benefits a group of people and they vote for that party because of that reason, because they believe they'll keep doing good things for them, I see nothing wrong with that. That's logical. I'm fine if the Republican Party does do something beneficial for a group of people to bring them into this country and they vote for the Republican Party, then fair enough. They did that. So I think that's entirely fair. And that doesn't weigh into whether or not I think it's a good idea to do a certain thing.
So there's been a lot of talk about AI lately, and a lot of people will tell you that it's overhyped. This is the big internet boom. People are worried that, we're going to lose all these jobs, and we're really not. And the other side's really concerned. The other side genuinely thinks there's going to be a massive, massive impact on our job market. I'd like to probably start with Dylan here. Dylan, when we talk about universal basic income, do you think that's going to be a necessity at some point in the future in our country? And also, on top of that, how do you think AI is going to impact the job force? And do you think it's being over dramatized right now?
There's a lot of questions there. I
Yeah, there
think
is.
universal basic income, no, I definitely don't think it'll be necessary. I think that part of it might be overblown. I think it'll be just like any other kind of technological innovation. There will be pain in the short term. There will be people who lose their jobs, but over and all, there will be much more wealth created than was taken away. And I think that's why you're seeing so much investment being put into AI. And I think that's also kind of evidence for why it's not overblown. I think if you're like someone like me who likes to follow the money, a ridiculous amount of money is going into AI. Every company that you know is investing in AI. And I think when that many smart people whose entire jobs rely on making these sorts of investments and they're all putting it in the same place, I think that is good evidence that this really will be pretty life changing and society changing. That being said, though, I don't think it's going to completely upend our society. I think people probably overestimate how much our lives will change because of it.
So one more point, you don't think we're going to see like a record unemployment rate in the next 20 to 30 years based upon solely the relevance of AI?
No, no, I don't.
Okay. Emery, I'd like to hear your response on that. AI is a really interesting topic, and also I think it really impacts potentially your job market and in the future. Can you talk to me about some of the quality concerns with using AI in your job market today? And can you tell me about the future landscape of AI?
Hmm. Yeah, and would you like me to respond to anything that Dylan said too, or?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah, I'll begin with, what I see for the future of AI. And I think that AI as technology, as it currently is something very useful and something very good for repeatedly doing the same solved problems, even though it may have a error rate, lots of work is being put into making sure that it's minimized, but it'll always be there due to the nature of the technology. Um, I think that looking specifically at the software engineering industry, we've seen a sort of knee-jerk reaction with a lot of companies discarding their more junior employees because they see that AI is able to almost like make up for some of the speed concerns with like trivial tasks that more senior software engineers do, which is a mistake. I think that you definitely need to be training up the next workforce, and junior engineers definitely very quickly become, those more senior engineers. And so that's going to be a huge thing, where we'll see like a huge need for these new engineers, in the software engineering uh, industry specifically. Um, but going on to the UBI discussion train, I think that this is a stance that I've almost always have, and it's all related around the effects of automation on our society. As we proceed more and more into a society where different tasks are automated and different, um, by whether or not by robotics, by AI, I do believe that some measure of guaranteeing that a given person in society has the ability to participate through economically, makes a ton of sense, especially since, stuff like flipping burgers at McDonald's might be automated completely away. I think is a good idea to guarantee that, a given person can live in a unit with warmth and food and even controversially maybe, access to the internet. So that's where I'm at.
Okay. Dylan, I won't add any questions this time. I think I've added enough, but can I have your response to what Emery said?
Um, well, I hope he's right. I would love for that to happen because I don't like working, and the second that that happens, I'm quitting my job and I'm snowboarding all day, every day, and chilling at the beach and having a great time. And so I hope you're right on that. Um, but unfortunately, I do think the effect on our society would be negative because there'd be too many people like me, and overall the standard of living would decrease. We'd see productivity decrease. I think really we can look at any pick pick your European country. Like I think we as Americans idolize that kind of lifestyle a lot, but when you really think about it, like when you actually go over there, you realize these people are actually like pretty poor. Like we're the wealthiest country in the world for a reason. Like it's not normal for people to have multiple cars and like big houses with six different rooms and stuff like that over there. And I think this is all a result of our focus on capitalism and the fact that we don't have, I don't know, such large safety nets to where it disincentivizes innovation and creation and hard work. I know that got pretty broad there.
I don't
Wasn't
think
it, Sarah?
I don't think that's necessarily the case for the majority of the population in the United States. I think that, the United States actually suffers from a major wealth inequality issue, that those, countries do not. I would actually wager that the median, person in one of those countries you reference enjoys a much more comfortable life than the median person in the United States. And the reason, and a lot of the wealth that is attributed to the great United States is actually more in the hands of, I know you love to hear it. We love to talk about that top 1%. Um, and it's because it's true. The top 1%, contains more than half of the, wait, my number may be off, but a significant margin or a significant portion of the, wealthy United States.
I'll get Jamie to double check that stat. But I think that really segues into our last topic tonight pretty well. And Dylan, if you want to respond to this, I'll give you that opportunity. Is it the government's job to close that wealth gap, or should they just focus on giving everybody equal opportunity in the marketplace? We'll start with Dylan.
Um, yeah, I think the government should strive to create equal opportunity. And what I mean by that is just fairness is all I want, really. I want everyone to have an equal shot. And I think how you do that is by getting the government out of things as much as possible. Because I fundamentally don't think that that's the government's responsibility to like try to close the wealth gap. I think the government's responsibility is to protect our rights. That's like what the founding fathers said it was, and I don't think it should go much beyond that. I think we've developed into a society where we like rely on our government a lot, and I think that's a problem. I don't think that we should be wanting government to solve all of our problems. In fact, I think it's the cause of many of them.
Emery, really excited to hear your response on this topic.
I think that, the fact that people are relying on the government is a failure of the government in and of itself. This wealth inequality was caused by governments relaxing a lot of, the taxes on the wealthiest and, allowing for these loopholes to persist. The wealth flowing upwards is
Is that why
not
people are
by,
poor though? Just loopholes? Is that like the
it's not,
entire Are you
that is
willing to
not the
give
entire, that is not
is
the entire reason. No.
do you think any people are poor because they're either dumb or lazy or made bad choices?
I'm sure there are some people who are poor because of that, but I don't think that's the case for the majority of poor people. No. I don't think that anybody would choose to be poor. That's silly.
Sure, they may not choose to be poor, but they also may choose to not do their homework, for example.
I don't think that makes you automatically a candidate to live on government assistance to skip your
Prob
homework.
There's probably a strong correlation.
I I believe that it's mostly unrelated. I skipped
I'm willing to
homework
bet
before.
people who do their homework end up pretty good off in life.
I've done my homework and I've skipped assignments and I'm a software engineer at a Fortune 500 company. So I think that
Well, don't
it's
act like you're a slouch. I mean,
Imagine
you
if you
but
didn't
grad.
skip any assignments, then where would you be?
if I didn't skip any assignments, oh wow, dude, I might be a CEO by now. No, I think that the big thing here is that, you know, I honestly think that you could even trace it back to, Ronald Reagan and his brand of Reaganomics. Um, that's a lot of where you saw like the relaxing on the taxes on the top 1%. And I don't see how we can expect the people to solve a problem that the government created. I think to reverse what the government did, we'll need more policy to get us back at least in the state we were before, so that these companies who have extracted wealth from the populace can start, you know, these companies and these individuals with massive amounts of wealth can start contributing back to the society that they extracted value from.
Dylan, I want to get your take on something. Do you think that two things can be true at once? Do you think, one, we don't tax the top 1% enough, but also people predominantly are poor due to just bad financial decisions they make? Can those two things be independently true?
Yeah, yeah, I think those things can be true. Fair question.
I want to hear, why are people poor?
Mm. Yeah, I definitely do think like I'm not gonna sit here and say that everyone who's poor is dumb or something or lazy. Like there absolutely are people who have gotten a really bad hand in life and have had bad luck and unfortunate things have happened to them, and maybe they've had tragic lives and all these sorts of things. And many of them they just grew up in a location or a community where they really had no chance to get out of it, and only the cream of the crop would ever make it out of those types of situations. And so that absolutely does happen, but I definitely think that's in the minority of cases, and I do think we should do things to help those people as much as possible. But the vast majority of people, yeah, it's absolutely decision making. Like if I remember back in high school, I'm sure we could back then even predict who was going to end up rich in life and who was going to end up poor just by their behavior. You can immediately see um, different behaviors that lead to different outcomes in life, and I think that that's a real thing. And I don't see the point in trying to ignore it or sugarcoat that.
Here's a good one, Dylan. If we distributed the wealth to everybody, 350 million Americans tomorrow, would people find themselves in the same class in the next 10 to 20 years?
Yeah, I was actually just thinking about this the other day. I was thinking about the reason why so many lottery winners go broke, and I think it's because only poor people play the lottery.
Emery, I want to hear your response on that.
I think that, a lot of what keeping people poor, I think that this actually touches on this, is a lot of the systemic issues that keeps people poor. It's, of course, there's people who may not be as competent who are in the lower classes. But that's not to say that there's people who are like people who are in the higher classes are automatically more competent either. Um, I think that a lot of the decision making is learned behavior and reinforced by years of being in that environment. And that's why it's so hard for, people to escape those cycles because I mean, it's human psychology that we're talking about here at this point. Um, and so I think that's why I am more motivated to do an approach where we start reversing these policies and start working on these systems to help uplift people because it's a lot of work to undo the damage done by these cycles and these systems to these communities. And it's impossible to rely on the people alone to start doing that.
Could you argue, Emery, that part of the systemic inequality is the poor money management skills passed down from generation to generation?
Yes, I would say yes. I wouldn't describe it as a failure of an individual, though. I would call it a failure of the systems around them, such as, say, education, failing to provide them with the necessary background to manage their finances.
Dylan, does it make you feel like some of the responsibility is taken out of the person and the decisions they've made financially when you hear the response from Emery? And I'm not dogging on you, Emery. This is just it's a
No,
segment.
no, you go ahead, go ahead.
I mean, I don't disagree with Emery. I do think that we should enact policies to help out people in those communities, similar to like what they've done in Baltimore recently. How they're just different community programs with the government. I think yeah, I think it's the mayor who did it. So like the local government, what they've put in place. And so I think there are examples of where that can work. Um, I guess really probably the only place we would disagree is I think the people who are like, and when we say poor, I think we're probably thinking of like the poorest of the poor, but they're still like the 25th percentile versus the 75th percentile. And I think when we're looking at just comparing that, the 25th and 75th, there's going to be clear differences between um, those people, both socially and culturally, but then also in competence, for lack of a better word.
Sure. Emery, if you'd like, I'll give you an opportunity to respond, and then I'll wrap up with a concluding question for each of you.
Okay. Yeah, this will be my so yeah, I think I think I think the reasons for that, I don't think it's incorrect, but I think it's a misleading. It would be a misleading statistic. I think that those people in those two situations, 25th and 75th percentile, if one comparing those two in two groups, if one group is more competent than the other, I don't think it's a function of money, but I would presume that people who are competent tend to get ahead, but I don't think the wealth makes a competence.
Yeah,
That'd be
yeah,
my
I would agree with
response.
that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree with that as well. Dylan, what do you think is the most compelling argument that Emery's made today?
Um,
Did you see any topic that we've talked about today where you said, actually, we kind of met in the middle a little bit. He kind of swayed me a little bit.
maybe this one. I think
Okay.
we kind of agreed there a little bit at the end. Um, but yeah.
Okay. Emery, what's the most compelling argument that Dylan made today, or was there a topic that you felt like you kind of met?
Yeah, I think the layered topics, especially, we started to maybe converge more. Obviously, with the housing thing, admittedly, it's something that Dylan and I have discussed plenty of times outside of this one conversation too. And I think we've already gone past things we agree on. Um, but yeah, I would say it seems like we agreed towards the end there too. I felt the same.
No, I thought it was a fun discussion. Agree to disagree, and we did that. But I also think we found some common ground today. We're coming up on an hour, so I want to thank you both for your time today. And I hope we can follow this up with some more topics in the coming weeks and record another one.
I'm definitely about it.
Sure.
All right, thank you guys.
All right.
Thank you, Joe.